This is a update on Tropical Storm Debby, and I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on that as it has formed in the extreme southeastern Gulf of Mexico. No worries for my people there in Texas, but for my friends there in Florida and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, we definitely have some concerns. Um, so if you look to the right of your screen at the bottom right, you'll see a satellite loop, and that's going to be continually playing. That is the infrared satellite loop of Debby. And then there also to the right, you can see the track of Debby, but we'll go into that into significant detail here. Looking at the rest of the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, you can see that there are no other concerns as of right now other than Debby. And so let's take a look at that track in detail. You can see that Debby is sitting just southwest, west-southwest of the Florida Keys and is moving northwest at 14. Sustained winds are at 40 miles an hour. And the pressure, not too low there, and we'll look at the reason for that right now. But as you can see, as Debby moves on up towards the the northwest and northwest, and then eventually starts to recurve, calling for Debby to hit the western coast of Florida up there as a minimal hurricane. And as I was talking about on the weekly wrap-up, if you're not watching our weekly wrap-up, I would encourage you to do so on Fridays at between 3 and 4. As I mentioned there, the waters off the western coast of Florida are extremely warm right now. It's almost bath water. It's 88 to 90 degrees. So looking at that system to become possibly a hurricane, a low-end Cat 1, as it makes its way slowly onto the north. And as you can see, the steering currents are going to just dry up there over the next 3 to 5 days, and we'll look at why that is. So taking a look at the 8 p.m. advisory, we can see that the Air Force is out there investigating, and it's at 24.1 north, 83.3 west, about 100 miles west-southwest of Key West, Florida. Maximum sustained winds are 40 miles an hour, and the pressure is not too low at 1,005 millibars. We have some watches and warnings out. A storm surge watch is in effect along the Florida coast there, and a hurricane warning is in effect from the Suwannee River to the Ocklawaha River. They have some strange names there in Florida, don't they? So let's take a look. The real impacts here, everybody tends to get wrapped around the axle when we talk about hurricanes. We always seem to want to focus on winds, but really what we need to focus on a lot of times is water. And as Debby starts to slow down, she's going to drop a lot of rain. And you can see the rainfall amounts here, especially towards Georgia and South Carolina. And we're going to look at this in detail here in a minute. Rainfall amounts 16 inches, and I think it could actually be a little higher, and I'll show you why here in a second. Over Florida, we're looking at 8 to 12 inches over a good swath of northern Florida. As you get back towards Miami, not too bad. But as you get up towards Orlando, start to expect to see more towards the 4-inch range. Now, looking at storm surge amounts, 4 to 7 foot storm surges as you get up towards Yankeetown, the Osceola River, and then 3 to 5 Indian Pass on down towards Bonita Beach. But here is where our problem comes in. We have flash flood risk over the next 5 days, at least a 70% chance. Between a 40 and 70% chance of a flash flood risk in this swath here from northern Florida over towards southern Georgia and extreme southeastern South Carolina. And here is your onset of arrival of tropical storm force winds. We're looking at late Sunday night, early Monday morning, with a really good chance of 70 to 80% chance there along the coast here, the coastal bend, the coastal bend here of Florida, just east of Apalachicola. Now, let's take a look here. We see the sun's going down here on the visible imagery, but I kind of want to, I put this up here because I wanted to show you what sort of happened during the course of the day. You can see that Debby was kind of organized over here on the southern coast of Cuba, and the center really made a jump across the land and kind of jumped. You can kind of see it here. I hope you can kind of pick that out. Let me stop it here and bring it back. You can kind of see it right here over central Cuba, and then it's almost instantly you see it pick up here kind of southwest of the Keys. So I'm going to slow that down. You can kind of see it turning right here over central and western Cuba, and then before you know it, boom, there it is. It's kind of reformed to the northwest, and once it's over the Gulf, you can see these thunderstorms starting to churn right around the center. And if we look at a good loop of what you see playing on the right side of your screen, what do we notice from this infrared picture here? This is picking up all the cold cloud tops. Well, what you see is a pretty disorganized system as of right now. You don't have what we call a central dense overcast, and a central dense overcast is when you have a cluster of thunderstorms located right over the center of the system, and you don't see that right now. And if we were to see that, then that would be a sign of significant strengthening to come. Now, I expect that we're going to see that starting tomorrow. We're still having some influence from the island of Cuba. It's still pulling in some of that dry air from the island, and it's also still pulling in a little air, drier air maybe from Florida. Once it gets over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, gets near those warmer waters, it starts to pull in some of that fuel from those warmer waters. You're probably going to start to see some of those thunderstorms really cluster near the center, and that's when we expect to see Debby start to strengthen and get maybe closer to that hurricane status. And what you'll also see is these thunderstorms start to consolidate. They won't be spread all over the place, and it won't just kind of look like this disorganized blob that it is now. You'll start to see that classic tropical cyclone look that we've come to know. Taking a look at the radar, you can kind of see that Debby, you can see the circulation there southwest of the Florida Keys, and you can also see the kind of discombobulated look to it. There is a lot of banding going on, and by banding we can see the bands of showers rotating around a general center, but not a whole lot of dense thunderstorms around the center, and we can really see that as we zoom in to the Florida, the Key West radar. We can see the center right here to the west-southwest of the Key West radar, but there is no 1 o'clock central. The newer models aren't in yet, but you can see they're fairly tightly clustered. Now, if we think back to some previous hurricanes, we had real wide spread in the models. Well, this is pretty much a done deal as far as where we're going on the Florida landfall, and that's the reason why the confidence is pretty high as of right now. However, as we take a look into the future, once the steering currents start to dry up, you can see right there in our ensembles, these are the ensembles from the European, the Canadian, the GFS model, which is the American model, and the UK Met. We're real confident on where this is going for the first couple of days. But once the steering currents weaken, it really spreads out. And we can kind of see that as we go into the future. It's the models are contained. The model spread is contained within this big blue circle, and you can see here for the first couple of days, going out 48 hours, it's really tightly clustered there in Florida. But then as we go just 5 days in the future, look what happens. It could be anywhere from Florida The models are putting it anywhere from Florida up all the way to southeastern Virginia. Now, granted, the chances of that happening are pretty slim. It's probably going to be somewhere in extreme southeastern Georgia or South Carolina. But then you can see what happens as we go 6 days into the future. The spread on it is incredible. And that is because what's going to happen is we have a trough currently to the north that you can see with the blue that's currently over Tennessee and Kentucky. That's giving me my showers right now here in Roan Mountain, Tennessee. And what's going to happen is that trough's going to move out of the way. The steering currents are going to collapse. You're going to have a little bit of a ridge building back over it. And the system's just going to sit there. And it's just going to sit there and it's going to sit there and meander. Now, if we look, that's the GFS model. And if we look at the European model, what does it show us? Well, guess what? It kind of shows us the same thing. A system that just literally is still sitting there 6 days later. And guess what? 7 days later, next Saturday, it's still sitting. It still shows the remnants of this thing sitting in North Carolina. So it moves it from 5 days to 7 days, not much at all. And matter of fact, from Monday afternoon to all the way next week, it really doesn't move it that much at all. And that is not good, because when you look at what the rainfall of totals are, according to the model is putting down 33 inches of rain. That's the European model. Well, what does the GFS put down? The GFS, if we go through what it's putting down, it's putting down upwards of almost 20 inches. So if we look at what the Weather Service is calling for, it's calling for upwards of 15 inches in extreme southeastern Georgia and southeastern South Carolina. Now, the rule of thumb that we've always used is that this is a pretty good amount, but in isolated areas, that these amounts, if you get training echoes, could be doubled. So, for instance, it's showing 10 inches in a good swath here from northern Florida across southeastern Georgia. Our rule of thumb always was there could be isolated amounts that are double if certain situations set up. So in other words, you could have areas of 20 inches of rain. You could have areas here, because it's calling for 15 inches, you could have areas here of 30 inches of rain, which if you go back and look again at the European model and go forward in time, it is calling for, in this area, 33 inches of rain. And if you look here at the same area and use our rule of doubling based on this chart, it's calling for, in the same period, 30 inches of rain. So the bottom line here, and the bottom line up front in the military, we called it the bluff. The bottom line up front is that the threat from Debby is going to not be the winds and really not so much the surge. It's going to be the extreme risk of flooding, because this thing looks like it's going to want to stall out. Things could change, and that there's going to be extreme flooding across the southeastern United States over the next week. So if you're in this area, if you're in the area of northern Florida, central to southeastern Georgia, almost all of South Carolina, and a lot of North Carolina, even up into Virginia, you need to be ready and prepared to take some action for flash flooding and flooding, river flooding, creek flooding, freshwater flooding. And we need to be reminded that freshwater flooding takes most lives in tropical events. Now, there are tropical events, obviously, that kill a lot of people through storm surge and through winds, but overall, freshwater flooding kills most people. because these tropical systems come in, they die, they wash out, they stall, and they cause extreme amounts of flooding. One of the things that caused me to want to be a meteorologist was Tropical Storm Claudette in 1979, where I was in Alvin. I was in Alvin, Texas, and you can look this up. I believe at one point they held the world's record for most rainfall in a 24-hour period, and it was 44 inches. And I was there. I was 10 years old, and it kind of left its mark on me and turned me into the weather bug, weather nerd that I am today. I don't believe we'll exceed that, but this is definitely something. If you're in these areas, especially if you're in this area here that is red and orange and yellow, you definitely need to take precautions. I will keep you guys updated for as we go through this unfolding situation. And until next time, may God richly bless you.